It's banless season. What's going on YouTube? Super Insane 18 here, and I am making sure that I bring you guys my banless prediction video before the banless this time, so let's go ahead and jump on in. So I sat down to make this video thinking that it would be relatively easy because I didn't think that too much needed to be done to the format, but then after doing some research, I absolutely crucified the game with this upcoming prediction, so let's go ahead and show you guys what I think. The first card that needs to be talked about because almost the entire community is calling out for its ban is definitely going to be Imperial Order. Now, Imperial Order is honestly just a toxic card, and the reason is because the majority of the spell and trap removal in the game is in the form of spells. So unless you have a quick play spell trap removal in your hand at the time of Imperial Order's activation, drawing into them later on in the game really doesn't matter because you won't be able to use them. Yes, there's cards like Nightmare Phoenix and Typhoon and Heavy Storm Duster and, other ways to out it that are not spells, but they are just slower. Not all decks have the room to run the Nightmare Phoenix, and if you're running the Nightmare Phoenix, then you're sacrificing what a better play would normally be, and honestly, it's just really not worth it. They did errata this card when they brought it back from the ban list originally, making it so that you have to pay the 700 if able, you're not able to choose anymore, and the 700 is during both turns, but honestly that cost is almost irrelevant. Life points are nothing but a resource until they hit 0, and I will gladly pay the 700 every turn for an auto win against my opponent. Imperial Order is just a toxic card that really needs to go. Next, I am going to predict that we are going to get a ban on Protos. Now, this is a card that personally I don't have too much issue with just because I haven't really seen too many of it at my locals personally, but I do know that it is an issue. It is a true King of All Calamities like effect where you can call an attribute and just turn off that attribute for an entire turn, destroying all monsters on the field that share that attribute and preventing your opponent from summoning it for the entirety of their next turn. Now, this is very toxic because if you're up against something like Drytron or Phantom Knight, these very meta-relevant decks that stick to a single attribute like Light or Dark, you can just call that type and completely stop them for a full turn. With games these days only lasting about a turn or two, shutting them off for an entire turn is definitely something that is a little bit too much to handle, so Proto should probably go to 0 just because it, like I said, it is an effect like True King of All Calamities that just completely prevents you from playing the game, and that's just not fun. We're all playing this game to actually play the game. Cards that say you're not allowed to play the game shouldn't exist. Next up, I am going to predict that we are seeing a ban on Predaplant Verte Anaconda. The reason that this didn't get banned on the last ban list, honestly, in my opinion, is because it was getting printed in the gold set that was coming out, so they needed to be able to sell it, but now that they have had their go at selling this card in the gold set, it's time for it to go. I don't think this card would be as bad if there weren't multiple fusions that you can use for it, but the fact that right now we have Dragoon and DPE, and we're getting a lot more fusions in the future that people are going to be able to just splash into any deck by running this card, doesn't really seem like it's a good idea. If you guys were around for the start of Orcust format, you know the memes that any two monsters is Orcust combo, and it's pretty much the same thing. Any two monsters is an oppressive fusion monster, and just being able to slap that on top of the oppressive board that you're already making for almost free in most decks doesn't really seem like it is a good idea or healthy for this game. I think that Predaplant Verte Anaconda is going to get banned on this list just because, like I said, they already sold it in the gold. There's no reason for it to be around anymore. Let's just go ahead and get rid of it. Now, this next one is another card that just says you're not allowed to play the game. Like I said when I was talking about Protos, games really only last 1 to 2 turns these days anyway, so cards like Artifact Scythe that prevent a core game mechanic for an entire turn are just a little too toxic to have in the game the way that it currently is. So I definitely think that Artifact Scythe is going to get banned. It's not necessarily like a Dagda issue or a Sanctum issue, it's the fact that no matter what you're playing, whether it be Dagda or Sanctum, you're able to just for free get a Scythe on your side of the field, and unless your opponent has some form of effect negation to chain to its activation, they are locked out for the entire turn, and again, it only lasts a turn anyway, so that does spell disaster for anybody that is getting Scythe used against them. It's just a free win condition, and it's way too easy to access. We should probably get rid of it. For this next one, we do have to address the elephant in the room, and that is that the ban list is somewhat of a cash grab for Konami. Not all things that see the list are there because they need to be, but because Konami wants to sell more product, and that's why I'm going to predict that Called by the Grave is going to go to 0 during this list. The reason being is because players still favor Called by the Grave over Crossout Designator, and I feel like they really want to push that Crossout Designator. Crossout Designator was pretty big in the OCG when it came out, but here in the TCG, pretty much everybody's in agreement that it's a bad card. It does have some niche uses in certain decks like Fluwanderies, but overall it is really not that great. So if they were to ban Called by the Grave, it does give players a little bit more of a reason to play cards like Crossout Designator, and I think that that's exactly what Konami's going to try and push. So if they hit the Called by, we're forced to play Crossout, as well as if they, maybe do some other things during the list, which we'll see later on. It gives Crossout that push that it really needs, so Call by the Grave is probably going to 0. Now, the last card that I'm putting in the Forbidden section is probably the only personal pick that I have. I didn't really want to make this a wish list, but actually a prediction, but I am going to have to say that Shaddoll Schism deserves to be banned. Now, the reason I think so is because this allows any deck that has the ability to send extra deck cards to the graveyard to play Winda without even main decking a single Shaddoll. Now, a lot of players are calling out for a Winda ban, but I don't think that Winda is necessarily ban-worthy. If you were only able to make it in decks that actually played Shaddolls, it wouldn't be as oppressive as something like where you can just use it in Invoked. You're not main decking any Shaddolls, but guess what? You still get a Winda, and I just think that that's very poor card design. The fact that you can use solely extra deck cards to not only search this, but then make the Winda is a little bit oppressive, and I think this card should really go. Moving on to the limited, I do think that Lyrilusk Recital Starling is the most limit-worthy card that we currently have. The fact that it is not a once per turn and is so easy to make for the Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk deck is a little oppressive. You can search multiple times in a turn and then overlay them into a negate all before you actually normal summon, which kind of puts you in a position where your opponent can't really stop you, because now you don't lose to things like Nibiru anymore, and you have multiple negates for their turn, and honestly just a not once per turn search is broken. Let's go ahead and put it to 1. We don't need more than 1 in the game. If you put it at 1, the deck is still very playable, it's just not oppressive. Now, this one is a little bit of a long shot, but I know that we have a lot of Pendulum support coming up in the upcoming sets, so let's go ahead and test the waters and put Electromite back to 1. I think at 1 the card doesn't really matter, it's still a good card, but you can't just use it every single turn, and like I said, unfortunately the ban list is somewhat of a money grab, so this will help sell the Pendulum support in the upcoming sets. If we put Electromite to 1, we can see a little bit of a resurgence for Pendulum decks that aren't really doing so hot right now, and I think it's definitely worth testing. Now, because Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk is the best deck of the current format, I don't think that hitting Recital Starling is enough to kind of curb its power, so we are going to predict that they will also limit Fractal. They did put Tenki to 1 on the last list because of this card, and it really didn't make too much of a difference because you still essentially have 4 copies of it in your deck. The fact that Fractal not only can be a Foolish Burial, but it can either turn into another Foolish Burial if you send Kit, or a Search of any Tri-Brigade if you send Nerval, is a little bit too much. Not just that, but because of how Tri-Brigades function, being able to banish from graveyard to special summon Link monsters, it does do a little bit too much loading your grave with the resources that you need. If we put this card to 1, it could potentially balance out the deck. I still think that it would be very playable, but the card definitely should go to 1. And for the last card on the limited list, I do think that it is going to be Tenyi Spirit Ashuna. I haven't been too secretive that I don't really think Sword Soul is a great deck, but it is seeing somewhat of a high margin of success, and because of that, this is really the only card that warrants being hit. It's not part of the actual Sword Soul archetype, so Konami can hit it without fear of not selling their Sword Soul cards, and it is kind of just the most free card, giving you multiple link materials. It is very recyclable with the other Tenyis as well, so being able to just use it to spam out your board and get to where you need to go is a little bit too much. Putting this card to 1 does slow the strategy down, but still make it very playable. On to the semi-limits, there is only one card that I'm putting in this category, and honestly, I think the card can go to 3 without too much of an issue, but Konami is going to want to test the waters like they typically use the semi-limited list for, and that card is going to be a Hero Lives. Paying half your life points to special summon a hero doesn't really feel too oppressive. I know that heroes are seeing a high amount of play right now, but this can push it to what it needs to actually be a very good meta contender, and honestly, half your life points, I know that I said earlier with Imperial Order that life points are nothing but a resource till they hit 0, but I don't think that Hero can really set up enough to where half of their life points, especially more than once, is going to put them in a game-winning position. So this card can come to 3 in my opinion, but let's go ahead and predict that it'll go to 2 just to test the waters, and then probably go to 3 when it doesn't do too much like most cards do. On to the Unlimits, let's talk about the first two cards as kind of the same point, and that is going to be Performapal Skullcrobat Joker and Emergency Teleport. These are both cards that went to 2 on the last list and really didn't do too much, so they can come back to 3 with no issue. Talking about Joker, like I said with Electromite, we are expecting some pendulum support, so putting this to 3 just makes sense, not only for a selling product perspective, but again, it didn't do anything at 2, so it really doesn't matter. And then if we look at Emergency Teleport, same thing, it really didn't do anything when they put it to 2, let's just bring it to 3 and give some of those psychics the support that they need. Now, it wouldn't be a banlist prediction video if we didn't talk about the most divisive card in the game, and that is going to be Max C. Now, I really do think that Max C is going to come back to 3, because we've had Crossout Designator for a while now, and again, nobody's using it. So, if we're gonna ban Call by the Grave to push Crossout Designator, why not also unban Max C to push it as well? Now we have cards like Ash Blossom that we didn't have when it got banned. I mean, I think actually it got banned almost immediately after Ash came out, so there really wasn't too much of a time to use that, but we have more ways to stop Max C now than we ever did, and again, pushing the Crossout doesn't really hurt either. I think the Max C is perfectly fine in the game, and a lot of people use the argument of, well, what if you full combo and have Max C in your hand, now your opponent's definitely not winning? If I full comboed and they're not stopping me, they're probably not winning anyway. Like I said earlier, many times, this format typically ends in 1 to 2 turns. It's player A sets up the biggest board they can, player B can't out it, player A wins. So if I have the Max C on top of that, it really doesn't matter anyway, because you weren't breaking my board to begin with. If you were using all your resources and not setting up a board yourself, so my Max C is almost useless anyway. Let's put it in the game, maybe it'll slow the game down, and honestly, I've had the most fun I've ever had playing this game when Max C was available, because it did slow games down. If you had Max C and your opponent tried to go off, they either gave you everything you needed, or you were playing a much slower game. And I think that it's just healthy for this game. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and I'm probably going to get crucified in the comments, but let's go ahead and put Max C to 3, see where it goes. The OCG has it at 3, and it's really not toxic, so let's go ahead and try it out here. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my banlist prediction for the January 2022 banlist. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, because for as low as $1, you can support me in ways that I will never be able to tell you how much I appreciate. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.